The commitment of the Salvation Army and all of us in this room is to social justice, both here in Australia and around the world. We've all witnessed and at times had the wonderful opportunity of actually taking part in the life-changing work that you do, and particularly, of course, your special commitment to working with people who are experiencing disadvantage. So congratulations and thank you to the leadership and dedicated staff and volunteers who give their time so generously, and of course to all of you for being here. This is the last session of, I know, a very big day when you've had lots of wonderful speakers who've been sharing knowledge and commitment for your significant contributions, as I've said. Now, most of you won't know, but I actually live in a converted Salvation Army building. I have lived in this building for 23 years. It was built in North Melbourne in 1919 as a young person's hall next to the church and the Sunday school hall, the children's section, in fact, it's called. Now, that's why we have up here, and I am supposed to press the green button. And here, of course, we have Commissioner James Hay, OBE, who many of you will know was only in Australia for 7 years, but at that time, he went around Australia and he built over 400 Salvation Army buildings, and 150 of them are youth halls, just like this one, which is my home. And all of these, and there it is, there's a nice autumn view. But I tell you this story because all of those buildings were in fact funded by donations, by philanthropy. They were all reliant on churches and charities and philanthropists who did the heavy lifting in those early days. And of course, I'm part of the Uniting Church, Wesley Church, which is my congregation. In the 1880s was full every Sunday afternoon with people who were passionate about trying to make our community a better place. And as we know, it was only later that the government began to really fulfil its role in providing social security payments. And of course, more recently, we have had more of the corporate sector being involved in social responsibility. So you've asked me today to talk about the value of partnerships in the community services area. And I'm not really an expert on partnerships. In fact, I believe there are many PhDs that have been written on partnerships and a lot of literature across all fields dedicated to exploring how they develop and flourish and mature. But what I do know is what they actually look like in practice. And in fact, if I think about our work at Uniting in Victoria and Tasmania, we deliver about 600 different programs right across the states, and we couldn't possibly do any of it without partnerships with all sorts of other people. I've had the pleasure, as you've heard, of working for many years in government, 11 years as a minister here in Victoria in a lot of portfolios, including community services, in fact, in the community services sector and also even in the corporate sector. And I've seen all sorts of attempts at partnerships. I've seen some work, I've seen some fall over very quickly. I've seen some that last a little bit of time with a burst of energy and some that go for a long time. Some are very locally focused, others aspire for huge policy change and broader social impact. In fact, partnerships are not only worth pursuing for resources, but they also reflect our collective responsibility to ensure that every member in our community is valued and included and supported to live their best life. In other words, we partner because we actually think everyone needs to have skin in this game, and we're a better community when people actually commit themselves together to be agents of change. They are, of course, reflective, I think, of the need to tackle the complexity of social problems. We used to think that social issues were distinct problems with their own unique solutions, and we've all heard a lot about the different silos that exist. So, you know, we've got housing services and mental health services and drug and alcohol services, and you could write the list better than I. But of course, we also know that the nature of human experience, and especially disadvantage, is much more complex than that. We're not homeless one day, hungry and the next day, a substance abuse the next day, dealing with a mental illness or a child protection issue next week. These things occur for people at the same time, each issue often compounding and complicating how we experience and deal with each of the other issues. In public policy, we talk about these as being wicked problems. Such problems are enduring, or challenges are enduring due to their complexity, resulting in the need to harness multiple skills and significant resources, and to get everybody involved in the effort to solve them. Complex problems need complex solutions. Co-occurring and intersecting problems need to be coordinated and integrated. And we often address only one small part at the crisis point, and we all run crisis points. We know what they look like. But in the end, we help for a moment, and I was telling Julie before that, we're at a point now in some of our homeless services, and I know you've been talking about housing a lot today, where the least worst option is a swag or a sleeping bag. But of course, that doesn't help a person regain their life. That doesn't help a person in the end build the capacity to be an included and valued member of our society. So we've talked a lot about homelessness, and I've got a lot of notes here about that. But, we do know that this is one of those issues that now keeps bubbling to the surface. Of course, at the time the support worker actually gets to deal with the person, they've often lost all of their possessions, they are in extreme poverty, there are some, absolutely horrendous circumstances, and the situation has become a lot worse than if we were able to deal with it productively at the first point of engagement that someone had. We know that the Commonwealth of State Government have kind of opened their ears, and I have to tell you, as a former housing minister, in 1999, the Commonwealth had started and had over many years begun to pull away from the Commonwealth State Housing Agreement to diminish its contribution, and of course, in those matching funding arrangements, the states did too. And so the high watermarks of public housing availability started to erode many, many years ago. But, the debate has raged for years, and there's still a conversation about who's responsible to invest in social housing. And on any given night in Australia, we know there are thousands of people weighing up their options on what is the best place to sleep for the night. Governments, I believe, absolutely do have to take the lead here, and that means shifting priorities, shifting funding priorities. But they can't do that alone. Community service organisations such as ours and businesses do play an important role in addressing it, especially, of course, given that we have seen this absolutely escalate over the last few years. But I also think that the broader community does need to be prepared to make some personal sacrifices for the common good, and to support their government in making the tough decisions that will free up resources and free up properties so that we actually can have more available supply. And sometimes that's against people's self-interest. And as we know, for all the lip service that people, tut-tutting that people do, it's pretty hard to act against self-interest. But it's going to require a national effort on the part of all of the different players, but on the part of the broader community that will actually end up saying, I'm a partner in this because I don't want to live in a community where the least worst option is a sleeping bag for a mum and a couple of kids who are escaping family violence and have got nowhere to go. So partnership is an absolute core requirement in delivering effective human and community services. And as I said, it's absolutely critical in addressing the complexity. And done well, they can deliver benefit and they can deliver efficiency because people are working together and not in hundreds of different groups all trying to tackle the same thing. They can foster innovation and be on a much greater scale than individual stakeholders could achieve on their own, sharing information, resource capabilities, opportunities, leveraging. So they're kind of hard work, but they're really worth having a go at. There are some really critical elements. Partnerships do need to be purposeful. And that has been, the sharing of common values is absolutely critical. And they shouldn't be just configured around financial gain. In other words, let's just join together because we can kind of do this job a bit cheaper. I think that we are at a risky point in the housing area in Australia because I've seen this happen, and those of you who've been around as long as I have will have seen it too, that when something becomes a crisis and government decides, hello, we actually have got a crisis here, we've got to do something about it, there can be an opportunity for the for-profit sector to see it as a chance of cashing in. And I've seen that in the employment services sector where a lot of people made a lot of money because the government was incredibly worried about high levels of unemployment, and then they opened it up to a marketised process. I've seen it in the NDIS, I've seen it in the mental health sector, and I think it's a potential in the housing sector as well. And I have to tell you, we're a housing provider, and we've had a lot of fund managers and developers come to us and offer the world, you let us have some of your land, we will give you 10% of it back in affordable housing. So it's their chance to cash in because there's a lot of money floating around. So the real partnerships that are genuine and that are value-based should be about delivering outcomes, not delivering profit just because it happens to be a flush time in that particular policy area. Outcomes for people who are not able to play in the marketplace, for whom the marketplace has failed them. Financial efficiency is important, and gathering resources from multiple sources to meet the demands is important, but making money shouldn't be the primary motivation. When we had an opportunity to partner, for example, we worked with Launch Housing and the Victorian Government and the Nurses Federation and some philanthropists to open Australia's first apartment building for women and children at risk from family violence. And that place is called Viv's Place, and I hope if you ever would like to go and see a facility like that, it's a safe place, people can live there for as long as they like, there's no time frame, there are wraparound services, case management, etc. And those kind of programs could only happen because of the partnerships that are involved. They're expensive, they require a whole range of skills, and of course they require strong relationships. And forging and sustaining productive relationships is also a really critical part of partnerships. Relationships that are built on trust, that have shared values, aims and outcomes, distribute roles and responsibilities, and have good systems in place to share information. Integrity, respect, honesty, transparency, all of these things are absolutely critical to making partnerships work. And of course, the other thing that we need is conviction, consensus, compassion and compromise. If you go into a partnership and you think you're going to get it all your own way, well, it's doomed to fail. You know, people do have to be able to be prepared to give and take to make things work. So when I was looking at the topic for this contribution today, and we'll get back to it. It isn't, we've got yours up there, but not mine, which was around partnerships with government and with the private sector and community services. And I noticed that one key part of the partnership was missing, and that's our consumers, the individuals, families and communities who live through the issues, who are closest to the complex problems that we are trying to address. And partnership, as you know, with people with lived experience is recognised as the most effective and enduring catalyst for sustainable change. And I think all of us are coming to this in more recent years, where we're really working hard to try and hear the voice of people who have lived experience in our services, but people who are currently our consumers, who can work alongside us and tell us, you know, what works, what doesn't work, what's meeting their needs. And you know, I think we've all seen the negative side of history when we all thought over the last 140 years, and it's the same for my former denominations, that we kind of knew best and that we could help to fix people up. And I think forging powerful and purposeful partnerships with our people can really improve service planning, design, delivery, monitoring, evaluation, all those things that can make a real difference, because our consumers do hold the skills and the creativity to address social issues because they're closest to them. And we're certainly working very hard at Uniting, and I know your programs are too, in building those partnerships. Partnerships, in conclusion, are absolutely essential, but we do face obstacles. They're often difficult to set up and maintain. They require political will and resources, and they take time to get going and time to implement. And we find ourselves, as I'm sure you do, in an increasingly crowded environment where we're often forced to compete for funding and resources, to compete for the fundraising dollar, and compete for a seat at the table. And sometimes that impacts on our capacity or willingness to work together. But I think we all know that in the end, working together improves outcomes for everyone. The challenge now is to better define the role and value that's added with actors in a wider field, and to really strategically select partnerships with people who share our values and our aspirations, to strengthen mutual accountability and ensure that in the end the collaboration actually achieves results, changes lives, helps people in our community live the best life they possibly can. Thank you.